So Craig, can you give me just like a general overview of what you're doing?
Sure, so we have a bunch of ENVE wheel kits. Primarily they're SES wheels, 3/4s, 5/6s. We do have some 3/4 ARs and 4/5 ARs, and just building them up, the whole kit, front and rear. Right now I'm building probably 4 wheels a day, time permitting. This is kind of in addition to my regular job, so this is just something I really enjoy doing. I volunteered for it, and it's been really fun. So right now I am inserting the spokes and I'm lacing it to the rim. These ENVE wheels are all 24-hole 2-cross. They come with Sapim CX rays, which are their arrow-bladed spoke. Really, I think about lacing in sets of 4, basically drive side, heads out, and then I'll do reverse, and then I will cross the spokes and do the drive side and non-drive side. I started building wheels, and this is going to date me, I started building wheels way back in 1986 when I was 16 at my first job at a bike shop. Back then, that was before there was really any kind of pre-built wheels that were available, and any wheel you really wanted was basically built at a bike shop. From there, just in college, I built wheels. I'm probably at this point now, before I started this project, was probably somewhere in the low hundreds of wheels, low 100, and then now I've already built 46 wheels in the last 2 weeks, so I'm probably now into the mid to high 100. I've been building 4 wheels a day. I do know that production wheel houses use a wheel lacing jig. We're in the process of having one built custom for us right now. Wheel lacing jigs are a really specialty item. You can't even really get them, and the ones that we were looking at aren't available, so we're gonna build our own. So now I'm gonna go ahead and set my first set of crossing spokes. Right now you have spokes that are basically parallel, and none of them are crossing. What really gives us a wheel its lateral stability is the crossing of the spokes. And the more crossings, the stronger your wheel is going to be. So you're going to tend to find 3 cross on most mountain bike wheels, even 4 cross on some e-bikes. Less crossings is a little less laterally stiff, but at the same time, shorter spokes and lighter weight. So like everything, it's always a balance. All right, so if you notice here, what I'm going to do is I'm now rotating the hub into place. Now it's starting to look more and more like what you would expect a regular wheel to be. And now I'm going to take my first spoke. And by crossing, I mean it's going to go over and then under, and that's the cross, right? So like it goes 1, 2 spokes, but it goes under the second spoke, and that's your 2 cross. I really just like the process of building wheels. I feel like it's almost kind of like a Zen thing. And then the rewarding thing is you take something that was literally just pieces, and all of a sudden you have a structurally sound wheel that someone can go out and enjoy. And that's a really satisfying thing. The whole ethos of wheel building is like you just kind of need to be precise, and it's repetition, right? So like you do need to pay attention to what you're doing. That's probably the key thing. Really knowing where you are on the wheel, particularly once you get into the stand and start shooting and tensioning, like, basing everything off of the valve hole so that you know that you're putting equal tension across the various sides of the wheel. Everything here is basically referenced off of the initial spoke I put in, which I call the key spoke. Where that goes, the position of the leading versus trailing spokes. This is all kind of like wheel theory. If you're interested, the Jobs Brands book, The Bicycle Wheel, or The Art of Wheel Building are 2 books that I've read before. They aren't really that practical, but I do find that information to be useful.
Do you have any opinions regarding hand-built versus machine-built wheels?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, machine-built wheels, they use a driver and they just basically have a machine and it just goes around, and every single wheel is going to get the same amount of turns no matter what. And they figured this out based upon a reference wheel. Hey, this built this wheel kind of decent, right? But what it doesn't take into account is manufacturing tolerances in spokes, manufacturing tolerances in rims. So if your rim isn't perfectly round, which I will say ENVE rims are probably the roundest rims I've ever worked with, but if your rim isn't perfectly round, and you set an even tension across every single spoke, it's not going to be a properly tensioned wheel. Another thing that happens with machine-built wheels is that they aren't stress relieved. I will stress relieve a wheel probably, 3 times at least before it's complete. And that means once I tension something up, I actually literally squeeze the spokes to stress them and kind of set them and make sure that if they're gonna move at all, that they move, and then I re-true and retension. So you're only gonna get stress relieved wheels while you're hand building wheels. So I laced the wheel, and then I made sure that the spokes are all laying flat against the flange. And so now I'm doing the initial tensioning of the wheel. Typically I would do this by hand, but because this is a high volume situation, as well as the nipples are internal, I can't even see the spoke threads. What you would normally do is, if you were doing this by hand, you'd basically, want to wind the nipples onto the spokes so where they're at a consistent depth on every single spoke. And when you can see the nipples on pretty much most wheels, you typically would either wind the nipple on so you can see one thread on every spoke, or you just cover all the threads, right? But then you still know, you have a visual reference that you have an initial constant starting point for every single nipple and spoke. Because you can't see the nipple on an ENVE rim, I rely on this drill nipple driver, which there's basically a pin in the middle of this driver, and the pin you can set to different depths. It has a set screw. And I have this set to about a 2mm depth, and that basically will then just back off the bit once I reach that depth. And it just allows me to go through and tension a wheel up to about 2/3 tension, in a fairly short amount of time. One thing you're gonna see me do, which is kind of something that I do, I'm not sure how many people do this, but this is a technique I picked up along the way, is if you just start adding a lot of tension through a drill to a rim, and you just go spoke by spoke, what you can end up doing to the rim is kind of deforming it a little bit so that you're basically tension's coming up, spreading this way across the rim, and then it's almost like you will end up with a hop around this hop. Because you've added tension, all that tension is going towards the where it's not tensioned, and then you will end up with like a radial hop. What I do is I tension up the wheels in pairs of, in basically sets of 4 that are kind of even around the wheel, so that the tension comes up evenly in sets of 4. Kind of the way I do it visually is I basically start with the inside spokes on the low tension side, and then inside spokes high tension, then outside low tension, outside high tension. You'll kind of see the wheel kind of take shape from there. So right now you can see it's really loose. So like everything, start at the spoke hole, and I'm gonna go inside low tension, which on a front wheel is the drive side, and just start tensioning up. All right, so we've added initial tension. As you can see, the wheel is looking a lot more like a wheel, and it's already fairly true. So next thing I do is I take my spoke tensiometer and I go through on the high tension side. I just kind of do a quick check of where I'm at with tension. You want to end up with a wheel that is laterally true, radially true, dished, meaning that the rim is centered over the hub. And basically the main thing is you want to make sure that on the high tension side, you have as even as tension as possible, because that's really going to be what holds the wheel in true. And so I'm looking really good here. And that's what the drill driver kind of really gives you, is just like basically a consistent starting point of even tension across the entire wheel. So that looks good. So the next thing to do is check dish. So this is my probably favorite tool that Abby makes. This is the Harbor gauge. It's pretty deluxe wheel dish gauge, but I find it to be probably the most easy to use and the most accurate. And so really what I'm trying to do here is check and make sure that the rim is centered over the hub and adjust accordingly. So I need to pull the rim towards the drive side just a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to dish the wheel this way. Look for my valve hole. That's where I start everything. I'm just gonna add probably a 1/4 turn to each side. Let's see how that adjustment went. Looks like I can go a little bit more still. And this is really kind of where it just gets down to like, you know, small adjustments. Very nice. All right, so now really added tension, got the dish set initially, check my spoke tension, know that I am close. Now I'll basically start looking at lateral and radial true. When you're building wheel, you just kind of start with your largest areas of where it's out of true and just kind of work in. And as you can see, I mean, because ENVE's wheels, the rims are so round and laterally true out of the mold, if you put consistent inputs in as you're tensioning, it really, there's not a whole lot of final adjustments that need to be made. I mean, these are just really small adjustments I'm making at this point. So once I have a wheel that is pretty close to final tension, is dished, and is fairly true, this is the part I mentioned about the difference between hand-built wheels and machine-built wheels, is I'm now actually gonna go through and stress relieve the wheel. And so what that really means is, like, when you build a wheel up, you know, your spokes may not be sitting perfectly flat against the flange, your crossings may not be perfectly, so what you want to do is you want to actually stress the spokes even harder than they would be as if you were riding them. I put my gloves on because these bladed spokes are actually pretty sharp and hurt, and I really give the wheel spokes a really good squeeze. You can just kind of let any kind of final movement of where the spoke is going to end up, kind of coax that out of the wheel, and that should, you know, depending on how much the spoke moves, pull it out of tension. I find, honestly, with these ENVE wheels that it doesn't really pull it that much out of true. Then I'll take it out of the stand, just kind of like, you know, laterally stress the wheel as well. All right, let's check. True it back up and repeat. All right, so that's how I build these ENVE wheels, which are now available on the TPC website. If you have some custom wheels you'd like to have built, come check out our TPC retail store in Louisville. Thanks for watching.